Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to COVID, business continuity, resilience, emergency management, crisis management, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there, so I'm really easy to find. Just send me a note and we'll see about getting you on the show or finding someone else to come on the show to talk about something you'd like to hear. I will be speaking at 3 conferences later this year. In October, the Continuity Insights Conference in Minneapolis, October 4th to 6th. November 3rd to 4th, I will be speaking at the BCI World Virtual Conference. And in December 1st to 2nd at the Continuity and Resilience Today conference, just down the road in Toronto. So fingers crossed I can travel to some of those this year. Today's show, we have a list of topics to talk about. And if you can see the 2 gentlemen on the screen here sharing their time with me, I'm sure you know exactly who they are. In the bright white screen, we have Ken Simpson, the Resilience Ninja from Australia. And we have Mark Armour from AdaptiveBC joining us from Texas. So we've got a global show today. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Good to be here.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, it is truly international. We've got 3 countries represented.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm really glad to have you guys here. And just like I said before we even started recording, I've got a feeling our agenda is going to go out the window really quick every time I talk to both of you, which is fantastic. I'm kind of really looking forward to what happens on this show. Ken, do you want to take 30 seconds and a quick introduction, just in case somebody doesn't know who you are?
Sure. So I'm going to give you a slightly different introduction, Alex. So I'm a person who spent a lot of time being a full-time business continuity person, but not in the past 10 to 15 years, basically. And advice that I give to people is that they should follow a similar kind of career path that says, if you want to get on in this space, get out of the space, get into the business, get into a delivery space other than being in corporate overhead. So that's me. I've been a CIO, I've been a CTO, I've been a business continuity lead for a large organization. And these days I spend most of my time in the project delivery and consulting space. And in between, I probably did a bunch of other things, but that's why my hair runs into the same color as the background that I'm using on Zoom today.
Mark, how about you?
Sure. So I've been in the business continuity profession now for going on 20 years, 19. I started in 2002. I guess I've spent the past 10 being kind of an antagonist of business continuity practices. And in 2015, Dr. David Lindstedt and I published the Adaptive Business Continuity Manifesto. We published a book in 2017, Adaptive Business Continuity, A New Approach, which we really just kind of have positioned as an alternative to traditional business continuity practices. We like to feel they're better, more effective, and less time consuming, less overhead. But I mean, the future remains to be seen. I think the important part is that as business continuity professionals, we look at what we do with a more critical lens and don't just take what we're told at face value. And I think having options for how we execute in this space is better, right? It will, at the end of the day, give us more options and ability to contrast various methods and approaches to business continuity and see what works. We may find that in some environments, in some industries, one approach works better than others, and that a different approach may be better in different sectors. So we'll have to see what the future holds, but that's me.
And that what you both said is kind of the theme of what we're going to be talking about today and the few topics. And the first one we have is coaching and mentoring. So Ken, I'm going to start off with you. My first question is, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring versus the traditional training and certification approach that we have today?
Look, I'd actually say you described three things there. I'm not sure I'd agree that coaching and mentoring are the same thing, but both as a model of development can be compared and contrasted to the traditional training process. That when training is essentially we're trying to transfer a skill. And you're going to need to have that base level anyhow. Whereas whether I'm not going to dive into too much about the difference, but if you use one of the coaching or mentoring models, you're mainly talking about trying to develop either the individual. I think mentoring is quite often about developing the individual's personal or interpersonal skills, and it's a bit of a softer thing. There's no requirement that the mentor has a lot of specific capability within the same field of endeavor always. But these things are about building on that base knowledge and learning how to apply it in practice, learning the secret sauce, the tips and tricks. I mean, if we change the labeling and go back to olden days, and as I said before, I remember them, you blokes probably don't, but it's the master apprentice process. An apprentice learns some basic skills, but then they spend several years working through with a master, learning the tips and tricks, learning how to refine those skills, learning them how to apply in practice. And probably, I'd say that's the base difference of it. You can only learn so much in the classroom, then you get tossed into the workplace and you need to learn how to do it properly. And sometimes you need to learn through that process how to, it's exactly what Mark was saying before, how to challenge the way the master's always done it, and see if there are different techniques that could be applied today. So sort of quick overview at that level.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I had two things. Every time I read something by Ken Simpson, it always seems to be several years later, and I'm always really annoyed that I didn't read it back when it was written, because it probably would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of frustration along the way. So Ken's much more forward thinking than many folks that I've run into. But Ken makes a good point, and it reminds me of a story. I was at a conference several years back, and a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, who was familiar with adaptive and really kind of understood what adaptive was, how we kind of got rid of the methodology and a lot of this deliverable and compliance approach to business continuity, and made it much more about engagement and collaboration with the business. And his question to me was, well, what does this do if we're consultants in the business continuity world? Because I think we traditionally think of consultants as people who come in and they take on a 6-month project and they deliver business continuity for the organization. And that's how they make their money, is they produce all of these materials and deliverables, and then they leave, and the organization is supposed to use all of this to be able to enable their recovery. And my answer to him, is actually before I even read Ken's paper, was, well, this really changes it to much more of a coaching and mentorship model, where we shouldn't approach this from the standpoint that our materials and our deliverables are the means by which business continuity is produced, right, or enabled within an organization. We need to understand that it's within the individuals that make up the organization. That's how resilience is built. That's how recovery capability is developed and improved over time. The materials just provide some support along the way, but it's really that coaching, that mentoring, that building, and as Ken's kind of described, right, that apprentice approach, where we bring people along on this journey and provide them the awareness and the tools to be able to do this themselves.
Ken, anything further to add?
I'll just jump in there a minute. That story reminds me of one that I've used somewhere else. I don't know if anyone has seen the movie called Strictly Ballroom.
An Australian movie.
It is an Australian movie, and it's got a similar scene, Mark, where someone says, "Yeah, what would happen?" And they're all instructors, they're all dance teachers, And what would happen if we allowed everyone to do these different steps? If we can't teach it, we have no business. And maybe that gets to the core part of the problem.
Well, then
I'll rewatch that movie now.
You'll find it out. Well, that leads me to the next question, because some of the governing bodies and a vast majority of vendors in business continuity do nothing but training. So when consultants, contractors, whatever you want to call them, go out to all these clients, that's the only thing they know is, Mark, what you said, develop all these plans and processes. So how can they change? How do we change overall?
I'm going to defer to Ken, because I think Ken's been thinking about this probably for a longer period of time than I have. I might have something to add, but I'm very curious actually what Ken's solution or thoughts on this are.
In coming onto this show, Alex, I thought, if I'm on with Mark, he'll get to make all the controversial comments and I'll get a slot free. Look, if what you do is training, and then your first reaction will be to sell coaching and mentoring training. And in all seriousness, the BCI offer a mentoring program. I don't know whether DRI do, but I'm assuming they would. And so people understand that. Again, I'm not familiar with DRI's processes, but I also know the BCI promote adaptive learning. So it creates a bit of a problem, though, because you can't sell adaptive learning. It's all the individual has to take responsibility. So yes, there is a conflict here, and it's part of the problem, I think, why this is something that the independents, the mavericks are trying to push different ways of thinking. Adaptive, as Mark said, it's just a challenge to status quo. Doesn't make it right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just another way of thinking. So yes, I think this is a problem that, as an industry, will constrain and tends to lead to a lot of the renaming processes we go through. When I received a survey during the week that was to do with the future of business continuity, I think it came from the BCI, and the questions had some implied expectation that things weren't going to change, and it's that kind of thing. How do we break that kind of thinking going forward? And it gets back down to how individual practitioners act rather than how governing bodies control. But it is a bit of a break. It's a bit of a different way of thinking.
Mark?
It is. And it's a different model and approach to training. Again, it's not sitting people in a classroom for 3 or 5 days, at the end of which you test to make sure they've memorized everything appropriately. It's really giving people some awareness of the competencies and the tools that they need to be proficient on, and really give them time and leeway and latitude to practice, to experiment, to succeed, and to fail. And that's the only way that we can really develop solid skills and expertise and competence in anything, whether it's business continuity or law or medicine, right? So we would have to fundamentally change our thinking of what training is and how we bring people into this profession and actually make them experts at this.
Do we need some sort of a training course? Yes, we a lot of vendors and organizations out there, leading standard organizations, have training courses on how to do BIAs and plans and et cetera, et cetera. Should we also add a component of how we as professionals train our clients? Because I'm sure we've all been in instances where, yeah, we know how to do BIAs, we're doing BIAs, and to Mark's point, 6 months, then we're going out the door, and it's been assigned to Pat. Do we need some sort of training to know how to properly mentor this newbie who isn't really coming into our organization, but has been assigned this role to understand. And that's kind of a gap. All BCM people may, let's say, take training and know how to mentor, but we need to be able to do that with people that aren't in our industry.
Absolutely. And I probably should have made this point earlier. This training, coaching thing, it's not an either or. We need to have both, right? You need training when you don't have any skills to start with. You need coaching to refine the application of those skills in the right context. And the harder part of the question, I think there, Alex, is if you go back to Mark's analogy, and I've been retained as this consultant in the past, and I'm sure others have as well, where you're there to deliver a plan, not a capability. You're there to deliver a plan, and the same very much applies if the end product is a BIA. But now we're talking about capability building and capability maintaining, more importantly, that says the consultant has left the building. Now someone has to keep this thing workable. So that's a slightly different model again. That's where we're not trying to coach someone or mentor someone we work with on a day-by-day basis. We're now trying to do it into maybe a bunch of different organizations where we're trying to perhaps build communities of shared experience, communities of practice where we are, as the consultant, are trying to broker continuous development of a number of people, not just in the one organization. So different ways to approach it. It's actually a window of opportunity for those consultants to change what they're selling and delivering. And that in and of itself might start to drive some of the change in the industry.
Mark, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, my concern is always that we bring people into the profession and we train them on the tools before we really kind of give them the expertise and the skills. It's like, well, if we're going to train someone to be a carpenter, well, we're going to give them the blueprint for a house and show them how you build a house first. And then we'll teach them how to work with various types of wood and how best to get when to use certain fasteners like nails versus screws and other things. We need to start with the basics. I think the problem with the current approach in business continuity is we are giving the blueprints to the house, and then we're following on with all these skills. So people then have this impression that all of the skills and all the expertise that they're developing over time is basically to help them complete this blueprint that they've been given, when really we need to flip that around. We need to give people critical thinking, active listening, communication, facilitation techniques. Then they can use that to determine for themselves what's the best approach within the environments, the organizations, the industries that I work with. We can give them tools like a methodology or different theoretical models that they can then pick and choose and apply as they best see fit. But unfortunately, the net result of how we've approached this over the past 3 or 4 decades now is we all suffer from a degree of groupthink, right? Because we've all been handed this methodology when we first walked in the business continuity door, and now we can't think outside of that methodology box. We can't conceive of how this might be performed without following the traditional business continuity life cycle.
Yeah, using your example of the carpenter, what value is there giving me a blueprint to build a house when I don't know how to use the bandsaw?
Yep.
On that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking today with Ken Simpson and Mark Armour. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Ken Simpson and Mark Armour. In our first segment, at the end there, we started to move from the BC professional to the resilience professional. Now, you also talked about the role of the professionals evolving from delivery capability to helping others understand what needs to be done. But in your opinion, how is our traditional BC person changing? What do they need to change? How do they need to think, act, behave, or deliver?
I think it starts with fundamentally changing how we view our role within business continuity. And this gets to what I mentioned earlier, which is we need to get out of this mindset that business continuity or resilience or recovery capability is something that we deliver, right? We can go in and over a course of time, we can give a business the resilience or the recovery capability that it needs. And I think we need to change that. I think we need to think of ourselves, and this is actually in Ken's paper, we need to think of ourselves as curators. So in addition to that coaching and mentoring is this concept that we aren't there as the folks who own business continuity or resilience, and that we're kind of like responsible for all this resilience activity, and instead help the organization and the teams, the departments within it understand the capability and the level of resilience that already exists. And through that understanding, what steps can be taken to improve the level of resilience that they have today. My theory, my belief is that every organization has some degree of resilience. They don't need a business continuity program. They don't need a resilience professional in order for resilience to exist in the organization. They've got it. It might be relatively low, but some organizations might have the diversity and the capacity and the collaboration and the agility that they've got a relatively high level of resilience, even if nobody's even thought about putting a resilience program in place. And we as professionals need to think of our role as going into these organizations and understanding, well, okay, here are the contributing attributes that make up the resilience of this organization. Where are some of those attributes maybe coming up short, or where can we make some improvement in those attributes, with the understanding, right, that there's always gonna be some weak link in the chain, and that's probably where we should focus some of our efforts, but also understanding that those improvements are each going to require significantly different actions and activities. They're not all going to be solved simply by following a specific life cycle in order to make those improvements.
Ken, anything to add?
Yeah. So agree with what's being said. Maybe the difference there is we also need to remember that we picked up this word resilience from other disciplines, and we're assigning meanings to it that potentially don't apply. So, if I always argue, firstly, I would rarely use resilience with a capital R. So I'm talking about it as something you are, not something you do, and it's a journey, not a destination. So when we start to factor those things in, then there is no tick box that says, "Oh, we've done resilience. What's next? Let's do agile instead." So it is all those things. And I said, it's not just something you come and deliver. It's not an SKU. You can't order it from someone's product guide. But I'm pretty certain if I did a Google search, I'll find at least a dozen people who do sell it as an SKU. So it's that mindset shift. And if you go back to what we were talking about before, it's the difference between delivering plans and building and maintaining capabilities. Those are profoundly different things. And if we want to become less business continuity practitioners, and the P word is another one I rarely use, but if we wish to become a profession, then we have to change a whole bunch of stuff. And some of it will start with acting differently. If we act differently in our interactions with the organizations we work with, then they'll change the way they think about us. And when they change the way they think about us, and the profound shift in any organization, if you are perceived as compliance overhead in your organization, well, Alex, this is the conversation we had a couple of weeks back, you're probably in the market and potentially unemployed in the current climate, because corporate and compliance overhead is the first bit that gets cut. Doesn't matter whether you do business continuity, risk, security, you're going to be gone in the tough times. So yeah, it's that kind of shift. You change that, you become a trusted business partner, and you work to help people rather than walk in and say, hey, you must do this because I've got a standard that says you have to do it that way. So it's again, changing the way we think, changing the way we act, and the rest of the stuff will follow, and make it about me. How do I develop myself to understand a wider focus on what I'm doing rather than the commodity skills.
But how do you address if you walk into a client site, you've been asked to do ABC, work, you've made a conscious effort to change your thinking, your behaviors, what you want to focus on, and they still turn around and say, well, that's nice, but we have a regulation we have to follow, and you must do A, B, and C, and as long as those 3 boxes get ticked, fine. How do you go about getting them to change as well?
As a consultant?
Not the consultant, but the client, because
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's happened to all of us here, is that it doesn't matter what our thinking is, they still want X, Y, and Z just to get the tick box.
Sure. So let's not be altruistic. If that's all they want, and I'm willing to take their money, then you do it. I probably wouldn't take another commission with them, but I'd take their money for that one and say, see you later. Right? And the other problem to that, Alex, is that I would almost always say that response is predicated on the level of the organization you're engaging. Right? At the top level, if they want that response, if they just want tick box, they understand why they just want tick box. And they have a very valid reason for it. It's because they truly don't care about the rest. And they just need, if you've got an adverse audit finding, you need to make that go away, right? That's it, particularly in government. You need to make it go away. Happy days, happy to make that go away. If you get further down the food chain and they see the whole world as, I've just got to get that tick box, then that's the people you need to change. And sometimes it's just the level of the organisation you're engaging in. And yes, some people, they only need that. So you just do it. And you keep the door open, and maybe as a consultant, your game is to sell. It's a hunt and kill mentality. You've got to keep killing. You've got to keep getting the sales. So, it doesn't matter where we get it, that still got to be done.
Mark, anything to add?
I guess being a full-time employee, right, I'm going to have a slightly different perspective. And generally, how I approach it is, I'll say if that's your objective, if all you want to do is check that box, we can do that. Just be aware that simply going forth and checking that box isn't necessarily going to deliver the product that it's designed to deliver, which is improved recovery capability or improved resilience. But I always position it as, if you focus on the ability to more effectively respond and recover from losses and disruptions, the outcome of that is also going to be compliance with requirements. If instead your focus and your objective is compliance, you will be compliant. There's just no guarantee. In fact, I would argue that you're probably not going to improve your recovery capability in any meaningful way.
So for all the people that are listening, what kind of action steps can they make? And let's say the consultants look at us in the BCM field right now. What kind of things can we do right away to start changing our own mindset so that we do start becoming more resilient professionals? Not just, a blanket statement, we got to change our thinking, but what kind of things do we really need to change to get there?
I think we've kind of alluded to this already a couple of times, and it's a good opportunity to emphasize something that Ken had mentioned, right? Which is resilience isn't a destination. Resilience isn't specifically a state that either exists or it doesn't. It's not a light switch, right?
Right.
This concept that an organization or even an individual is resilient or it's not, it's just flat out wrong. Everything has some degree of resilience. And if we change our thinking in that matter, and we realize that our role is really first and foremost to understand the level of resilience that exists as it exists in terms of being made up of various attributes within the organization, then we can start to realize that our role is not now to then make them resilient. They're already resilient. We just need to help them identify that level that exists, the steps that can be taken for them to improve their level of resilience, and kind of a fundamental understanding of the methods and the tools and the theoretical models that exists to help them both measure the resilience that exists and identify those opportunities for them to improve.
Ken, anything else to add?
Yeah, look, you said before about specific things other than think differently. That's going to flow to act differently. So if we were talking before about delivering plans, so if you're coming in to do, and this is the consulting position rather than employee position. If Mark engages me to help him do something that I perceive to be predominantly compliance driven, and that's fine, I'm happy to do it. We can come to it that says our job is, if we're trying to think in a resilience mindset instead of a business continuity process mindset, is we can come in and act differently in terms of, we're not here to deliver a plan. We can be the brokers of collaboration across silos. We can start to encourage people to talk differently about the difference between plans and capability. You would still do that in the context of a tick box, get rid of an audit finding type of engagement. If we move away from the commodity skills, I've got a piece of software and it will solve every problem you've got type thinking, which they never do. They normally create a whole new set. We get away from that. We're here to encourage people to work together towards whatever the objective is. So we change what our practice is. And the other part is we stop being fixated on, we've got this narrow focus, and sort of say the starting point is, you really need to understand the business that you're working with. You need to understand the industry they operate in, and how that business works, where it derives value, and how that's done. And sometimes you're just bringing insight to the table that helps people develop those capabilities, and you get a bunch of different ways you can act and bring different things to the table that encourages people to think and act differently within that organization.
Well, you mentioned soft skills, trying to get those changed in people and ourselves. And I'm wondering how you go about dealing with people who are highly intelligent. I'm guaranteed we've all worked with those kind of people. Really intelligent, they know exactly what they're doing, but yet they have no soft skills. And they're trying to get them to even communicate is like pulling teeth. And that's got to be some of the challenges that BC professionals have as well, because I've met some over the years, highly intelligent, but I would say some of their soft skills are a little bit gray, in the gray area, so to speak. So how do we kind of deal with soft skills? Because that's not an easy thing to sit down at a board table in front of the C-suite or with a subject matter expert and try to get changed.
I guess I'll give it. Ken made an interesting observation that I want to emphasize here too, right? And this might be a good stepping stone to when we talk about soft skills. But Ken talked about relationships and collaboration, and I was reminded of a lot of the research in the resilience world tells us that resilience in a complex adaptive system is not a component of the level of resilience in all of the different components that make up that system. It's actually the relationships that exist between those components. That's where resilience lives. Resilient organizations don't have a top-down approach. They actually delegate authority and they allow autonomous connections to build when losses and disruptions occur. And if we're going to, as a discipline or as a profession, a resilience profession, going to focus on soft skills, then we need to understand that's probably the most fundamental area we can focus on, because how can we hope to develop that network and those relationships within an organization if we ourselves can't model that behavior, if we ourselves aren't capable of establishing relationships, positive working relationships within our organization. That to me is probably the most fundamental skill that we need to have as professionals.
It's the team building and the teamwork, and those kind of things that will get people wanting to work with you, and you work with them as well.
And it's just basic relationship building. I think too often, and this isn't just a flaw within business continuity. I see this everywhere. People are seeking to engage leaders within their organization in order to obtain something, right? We need engagement or support for our business continuity program. I need approval for this budget or to obtain this tool. I think we need to change that. I think we need at the outset to make one of the primary objectives of ourselves and our programs to build relationships. Not for the purpose of achieving some end game to get that tool or to get that engagement, but to build relationship for the sake of building a relationship. Because then when you do need support, when you do need that approval, that relationship already exists. And just that relationship itself just contributes to an improved level of resilience within the organization. And to me, what I've experienced over the past several years is the magic happens not just my relationship with a specific leader, but the relationship that exists that I have with multiple people throughout the organization, so that I'm in a position now to connect to people within the organization. Someone needs an answer to one question, or they need some level of expertise. I know where that expert is. I know where that person lives. And rather than trying to answer that question or get the question from them, put those people together. Now you're genuinely building a network. And that's where true resilience lives. And I think if we come around to this idea that we need to build relationships for the sake of building relationships, not to achieve some other outcome, then I think we'll put ourselves in a better place.
Yeah, I couldn't help think of the everlasting problem business continuity professionals have, and that's getting that executive buy-in, and that always seems to be the start of, oh, you need a business continuity program, okay, we need executive buy-in.
Yeah.
You jump all the relationship building and the network building and all the other things you mentioned, and just jump straight to the boardroom table and expect, give me $1 million to do X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. Then we look at ourselves as salespeople, and we're using scare tactics to try to get their buy-in. That's completely the wrong way to do it.
Ken, do you have?
Absolutely.
See, you're nodding.
Oh, no. Thoroughly agree, and some of it comes from developing the confidence in people to put their case and to tell their story in the right way. I'll just use a quick example. A couple of years ago, the audience will well remember when we used to have conferences that we attended in person. But a couple of years ago, I sort of got to the point in the Australasian BCI conference that I felt that I could do something different rather than stand and talk stuff. So I pitched this proposal that we'd get some young professionals, and actually the age didn't really matter, but those who had never presented at a conference or rarely did this kind of thing, and coach 2 or 3 of them in the one session to tell their story for 10 minutes rather than have to fill a 30-minute session for each person. And that in doing that, I'd coach them in a way of doing it that didn't involve death by PowerPoint and endless dot point slides, but that we'd use a different philosophy to materials, and did that for a couple of years. And to be honest, it again, this comes back to thinking differently, acting differently. You can't do the things Mark said if you actually don't have the confidence within yourself to tell your story. And if your model of telling a story is, I'm going to scare you with compliance statements, or I'm going to give you death by PowerPoint, no one's going to come and listen to your story and come along for the ride with you. So we can do things differently. We need to build the soft skills are absolutely the difference. Those commodity skills of how to do a BIA, how to drive a piece of software X, how to get compliance outcome Y, those are great. But you're not going to go past the first base with them. You need those personal skills. And again, it comes back to the individual. Go learn them, go develop them, find someone to help you develop them. Yeah, it's the same message. It's the journey.
Well, a lot of organizations, for both of you guys, you have leadership positions. It really comes down to the individual themselves, their person, realizing they need to make a change within themselves. And when it comes to resilience programs and business continuity programs, or even organizations in general, we always say, what's the biggest asset for any organization? People. So it seems as though now we're looking at really showing that people are the core value, ourselves and our colleagues, rather than just saying they are. Now we have to take the action to really show people are really what the core success of this program is, ourselves and the people we work with, not the plan. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, I've always worked on the premise that the people were more important than the plan. If go and look at real world cases, you get the right bunch of people round the table or on the phone. Even if you don't have a plan, you have a chance. But you got the best plan in the world, and your people can't connect.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, ain't going to happen.
Mark, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to agree wholeheartedly, and thank you, Ken, for stating it probably more succinctly than I would have.
On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking with Ken Simpson and Mark Armour today. We'll be right back. I hope you've been enjoying the talk with Mark Armour and Ken Simpson. We talked for almost an hour and a half. So what you just saw were our first two segments. That was about 45 minutes or so. The last segment will be a separate show. So make sure you tune in for more of Mark and Ken and all the things they have to say. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.